County Board of Commissioners into session at this time. And if you all would, please rise. I'm going to ask Commissioner Jennings if he'll lead us in the invocation, and ask Commissioner Ferguson if he'll lead us in the pledge.
Everyone would bow their heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, bless this gathering of county commissioners and citizens and employees of Alexander County to conduct the county's business tonight, and hopefully to make progress on the 2014-2015 budget. Also bless, I know Memorial Day has passed, but bless the men and women who have served and who have died for this country. They are deserved of all the honor that we can bestow upon them. And God bless all the people of Alexander County, the state of North Carolina, and God bless America. Amen.
Attention, salute, pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. As most of you know, this was a called meeting, and the purpose of this meeting, we're here for the purpose of discussing the upcoming 2014-2015 budget, and that's why we're here. This is a work session for the county commissioners, and that is the only thing that will be on the agenda tonight is the 2014-2015 budget. This time, I would like to call on County Manager, Mr. Rick French, to give us an update on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In front of you, each of you tonight, you have a new revised budget. And so you have that information. You also have a one sheet, number of employees by department. It lists the number of employees, full-time, part-time with benefits, part-time, no benefits, temporary, seasonal, and totals. So that's information I just want to make you aware of. You have that in front of your place, in your places tonight. We went back and looked at the proposed 2014-2015 budget. The budget you have in front of you is $34,544,007. The current budget is $35,543,515, so it's a little over $1 million less. The proposed budget for 14-15 is a little over $1 million less than the current budget that we're in. And again, as we talked at our last couple of meetings, requested by all the county departments was $38,389,041. The capital that's in the budget, just to go back, is bulletproof vest, which is $20,125. That's in the information that you have. An ambulance for EMS. Animal control has a piece of equipment that's required. That's $4,500. And there's a mezzanine barrier for detention, which is in contingency in the general fund. There's also $22,500 in IT, which is $22,500 out of $133,000, which was requested by departments for IT needs. There is a two-person purchasing department scheduled to start January the 1st. There are no other new personnel in the budget. There's no COLA. This year, when we adopt the budget ordinance, we're going to ask you to adopt it by position, to cap the positions, to cap all the full-time and part-time positions. That's why you have this sheet in front of you. That's the number of full and part-time positions. That's where we'll start the fiscal year. That'll be part of the discussion that we have when we adopt the budget ordinance. There's another item in contingency. There's actually $50,000 added to contingency for a emergency services pilot program, which is something we'll talk more about as we get into the fiscal year. Outside the budget items in the general fund, there are no other increases in solid waste or fire taxes or that. There is a 5% rate increase, water rate increase proposed, as we talked about earlier. each of you have received or will be receiving a letter dated May 27th that deals with a program, compensatory education program that CVCC offers, and a letter signed by the parents for some of the children in that program. Each of you received that, so I just want to make sure you have that information. And Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of things I could go over, but again, I guess we'd just be rehashing what we did the other night. So
I
at
totally
this time,
understand
I'll be
that.
glad to answer any questions or,
I totally understand at this time. I'm going to open up, so if any commissioner has any questions concerning the budget or any concerns, now's their opportunity to do so.
Mr. French, a question.
yes, sir.
The list that we have in front of us on this paper for all of our edification
Yes. Yes,
and
sir.
for the edification of people listening and watching,
Yes, sir.
what does this list, what is it going to be used for?
It'll be used for, that's the number of full-time and part-time positions that are currently in the budget. That are the most recent numbers, and those numbers will be the numbers that we cap as we start 2014, 2015 fiscal year. What that means is that's the limit on the number of employees that for each department.
If I may ask a leading question.
Yes, sir.
Take the Department X, that
Okay.
has 10 part-time employees. And one of those employees decides to leave to seek full-time employment.
Yes, sir.
Employment. So therefore, you're left with 9 part-time
Right.
employees.
Yes, sir.
Do you fill that 10th position?
I think we'll have to, at first, we'll have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and that'll be something that we'll fine-tune as the year goes, as the fiscal year goes on, and we'll bring those back to you.
Okay, but what you're going to use, this is the
That's the limit. Yes,
the upper limit,
that's correct.
and case-by-case basis.
That's
You
right.
could gin down from that, is what
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying?
Yes, sir.
On a case-by-case basis,
That's correct.
okay.
Why do we have a part-time employee with no benefits in the tax office? I worked in the tax office for 20-some years. I never knew us to have any kind of part-time.
We've had a part-time person in the tax office for many years.
Oh, okay, with no benefits?
Yes, ma'am.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. French, I'm assuming, of course, that we're focusing on this part-time because of the provisions of the ACA that we're not really sure about how it's going to affect us.
Obamacare.
It's more of a budgetary accounting thing than anything else. Yes, sir. What we have to do is, our finance director has to verify that money is in the budget before those positions are filled, not the opposite. We can't, you fill a position, then make sure the money's there. So as we go into the budget, all those positions are the funds are there. But as the year changes and it progresses, we want to make sure the money's there before that position is filled. So before Ms. Herman signs off on it, then we want to have it lined up in advance.
So to be clear, if a department, you say that there's a cap, but let's say the department decides, oh, well, he said there's a cap, but I'm going to add a part-time person. How's that going to work?
Won't be able to do it.
Okay. So departments will not have that
The only,
ability.
the commissioners could always change it, but as far as administration, we'll administer it that way.
In other words, nothing's taken out unless they just happen to decide this person does on leaving.
No, ma'am. If there's, like Berkey was saying, Commissioner Jennings was saying, if there's 5 part-time positions in the budget and one person leaves, as we start the fiscal year, we'll review that replacement position. We can fill that position, but they can't have 6 positions or 7. They can't have more than the 5. 5 is the limit. This is the absolute limit as far as part-time and full-time employees go.
Mr. French, may I ask kind of a question that kind of alludes to what Commissioner Moose is talking about, hypothetically only?
Yes, sir.
Going back to the part-time in a particular department goes down to 9 because one person leaves. It will be up to your discretion, working with Jennifer in accounting,
That's correct.
and the board to decide whether or not we fill that position.
Well, it'll be up to the staff, and then we'll report back to
That's,
you.
okay, yeah, that's right. I just want to make.
But what we want to make sure is that the money's in the budget before anything is filled, so that we don't have to come back with a budget amendment for anything to you. You know, try to limit that much more. You'll still have some budget amendments, I'm sure, for there'll be other things that are going on.
Because that's one of the crucial things we've been talking about through this entire budget.
That's correct.
Discussion is to limit the number of budget amendments that we have in the next fiscal year.
That's right. We've actually have less this year than we did last, and that's something we continually to work on.
And if we do the savings, for example, that you've, and the finance department have discerned from last year's budget to this year's budget, the over $1 million you're talking about, that money is really going to go to fund balance, is it not?
No, sir, that's not, I mean, that $1 million won't go in fund, you're talking about the $1 million where it'll be less?
Yes.
No. That's just $1 million less that will be budgeted.
So it's savings though, right?
Well, it's savings from over this year's budget
right.
in that sense, yes.
Right.
But it's not actual money that'll go
We're
in
not
fund balance.
spending that much more money.
That's right.
Okay.
But without a tax increase, what you're saying is we're still going to be in shortfall.
Oh, yes, sir, we will.
All right.
Our fund balance will still be in trouble like we discussed at our last meeting.
All right.
So this proposed budget is $1 million less than the current budget we're under now,
That's correct, yes, sir.
okay? One of the concerns I have is the ACA or Obamacare. Do we have a good handle on how that affects part-time employees?
Yes, sir, I think.
I
we
mean,
do.
you know without a doubt that these employees are not going to go over a certain number of hours that's going to affect their eligibility where we have to provide them with health care benefits?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In
And-
all departments?
We know where the hours are being budgeted. We talk to the department heads in the areas where we have problems, but we know where all those hours are. All those hours are recorded. You know, we have some part-time people that work a lot of hours, and we got to work with that one department to make it better. But we're aware of it, is what you're asking, and we are.
And you're going to continue to monitor it.
Yes, sir. If you exceed 30 hours, you have to provide health insurance for them. 20 hours, you have to provide retirement. So if you have somebody that works those continually, we'll have to treat them almost like a full-time employee with all the benefits, and that's what we want to try to avoid.
Even though they may be getting benefits from their full-time job. So most of these
correct.
people have other jobs, or a lot
But
of them do.
as commissioners understand, we don't control the schedules of some departments. And so therefore, we have to work with those departments on trying to keep those hours down, and we try to.
Recreation, we've got, 195 umpires, referees, et cetera. Do you foresee any reason whatsoever why?
No, sir.
Okay. They would be going over that 30-hour or 20-hour limit?
That's not going to happen.
Okay. All right, that's all I had about that.
If you have any questions that concerns anything, now's the time. Doesn't make any difference what it is. If you want to talk about it, let's talk about it, because this is an open work session, and any discussion needs to be had here.
Well, let me just say this, and maybe it's talking too much about the same thing, but just I want to use myself as a personal example. And it's how crucial it is to monitor the 30 hours and whether or not a person would be eligible for, if they went over 30 hours, for the Affordable Care Act. Colloquial expression is Obamacare. I had, or have currently, a Cadillac health care plan because I worked and retired from AT&T. And effective January 1st, 2015, I no longer have that plan. I'm going to be going on a AT&T created healthcare exchange, and it's a healthcare savings account. It's nowhere near what I have now. But the point I want to make is, it's money out of AT&T's pocket that it's subsidizing that. It would be the same thing here if we have to pay for that Affordable Care Act insurance for that employee that goes over 30 hours. It could turn into a lot of money if you multiply the number of part-time employees employees we have. And that's the point I want to make. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, sir.
So it's crucial that you and the finance staff monitor that.
And we do.
I know you do. I'm just saying just want to make sure that everybody's aware that y'all are very diligent on monitoring that information.
Finance, human resources, we all keep an eye on it.
Yeah.
I'd like to come at it from a different direction, though. Having been a part-time county employee before, and to the people listening and watching, one of the problems with our current system in certain departments is there's a little bit of an exploitive nature that happens with the part-time employees. They are basically hired for a part-time position, but they're eventually worked sometimes as much as a full-time position. And there's no guarantees from that department or from the county that they will ever go into a full-time position. So I think everyone back home needs to understand that we're wanting to reduce the number of part-time personnel to stop a little bit of this overwork and exploitation. The full-time personnel, they're budgeted by the departments to meet the needs of the department. The part-time people are there for contingencies to fill in. They're not supposed to be replacement workers. Is that the general gist of how we're supposed to use part-time people?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In all the areas, in all the departments, except for one, are areas that fall under the the manager form of government. And all those areas, there is no, as far as keeping people at 30 hours or 20 hours or any of those kind of things, those are something that we monitor, we talk with the departments. Outside of that, we have conversations with the departments that are impacting those items you're mentioning, the same that Commissioner Jennings mentioned, if they work more than 30 hours, or if they work 40 hours, or however much they work in a two-week cycle. So we monitor it very closely.
Except for one.
We monitor all of them, but we don't have control of one. We monitor it, follow me. We can tell them, we know how many hours there are. We can contact the department head and say, you're exceeding those hours, and this is what this means. Work with us, and if they do or they don't, we don't have a lot of control of that.
The only control we have over that is just eliminate the part-time positions down to a
That's right.
certain number.
That's
and
right.
cap it. That's the only control that we have.
So what we're proposing to do is that we'll cap the number of positions as a starting place.
Okay.
So
Are we-
nothing really changed from the last meeting? In other words, you did not, nothing's changed?
We've
Same
we've
song,
reduced
just
another,
second verse.
we've reduced another $100 and some thousand that was proposed, in the proposed budget to reduce it another 100,000, yes.
Well, what was it?
It was like right at 900,000, so we've taken it over $1 million now.
What was it, though, that you
It
took
was,
out?
it was changes in sales tax, there's a couple things like that, Commissioner Moose, that we deal with.
Okay, just
We,
move
we,
figures
we
around.
look, I mean, are always looking at different things, but again, in the budget, there's limited amount of capital, there's a limited amount, there's really not any new employees until the purchasing department starts in January, so there's not any, everything pretty much rolls right along. And what we wanted to do was to cap the full and part-time employees, so we could get a better handle on it.
Okay,
And
so-
we closely monitor it,
So we're going to be capped.
yes.
Are we going to have any sort of conversation after this budgetary session, after this budget's fixed?
Yes,
Are we
sir,
going to have
we will.
another conversation about perhaps not filling positions as they're vacated?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We certainly will.
I thought we had that understanding earlier, that we were not. 6 months ago, we said we wasn't gonna fill positions as they become vacant.
We did not say, that was not,
I want to ask one other question also. The position of engineer, is that included in this? I mean, is that salary included in
it's
this
in the,
budget?
it's in the water and sewer fund.
Is it included in this budget?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
And all of the, like his office and the whole 9 yards,
Yes,
everything
ma'am.
that goes with
It's
his
included in the
office?
budget, yes, ma'am.
So that is a added thing from last year,
That's in the current budget.
but it was added,
It was added last year. And, it's in the 13-14 budget.
right?
So and it's also in the 14-15 budget, yes, ma'am.
Well, where did we get that money last time?
From the water and sewer fund. We budgeted in our water and sewer fund.
But we have it budgeted in this budget for, this year.
Yes, ma'am,
We're gonna have
sure
to
do.
come up with that amount every year.
Yes, we certainly will.
Okay, just wanting to make that plain.
Okay.
But, Mr. French,
It is, comes from taxpayers' funds.
No, it comes from water and sewer funds,
Well, where do they come from?
from water and sewer bills people pay.
From people's money.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, yes.
but it's not from tax revenue, it's water and
Right.
sewer.
It's from
funds.
water and sewer fees.
No, I'm kind of coming late to that conversation about the creation of the county engineer, but my understanding was the county engineer's position was actually a cost savings compared to the contracts that you were having to pay before for engineer work.
Yeah, it actually, he is. He's working with, like, for example, now on the water project, he's working with that water project to help us save money as we go.
Okay.
Yes. He'll work with us on the courthouse project when we do it.
And he'll be actively involved in the CVCC project.
He'll be heavily involved in the
And if I'm not
CBC.
mistaken, I think, Mr. French, don't mean to interrupt you here, but I think I got a couple you sent some information to me about some of the things that he had already done that had already saved the county several dollars. I'm not gonna use a figure because I'm not a figure person. I have to look at it to be able to
Sure.
do. I can't just reel them off like some people. But, I mean, I think the cost savings of what he has given us in this last year has also really outnumbered what possibly his salary is to start with. Is that correct?
I would think so, yes, sir.
I mean, because it's not coming, I mean, the thing is, it's in the budget, but the water fund's in the budget also.
It is.
And so that money is actually being used to subsidize, not subsidize, but to pay for the county engineer.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Does anybody else have any questions?
I do have a question, and I hate to dominate the conversation. so-
They're not going to bother anybody. The reason we're here tonight is to clear up some of the questions and things that's going on and what I'm hearing in the community. That's why I asked to have this meeting tonight to clear the air.
I'm looking at the new budget, looking for the item line for the vehicles for the sheriff's department, and obviously, they're not going to be in there, right? I'm a little concerned about that, only because of the lack of the four-wheel drive capability. This department, this sheriff's department, probably should have had years ago, and they still don't have it, and whether or not that was a lack of foresight or what. Is there a way, budgetary-wise, that we can tie or put on contingency a way for the sheriff's department to be able to, they have, 574,000 projected for revenue from the jail. If they go over that 574,000, is there a way we can tie into contingency, that if they make it over that they can use any monies gained past that projected 574,000 for vehicle purchases?
Certainly, that's, I mean, as any budget item, if the commissioners approve the budget and you have that provision in there, if he raises 630,000, the difference could go towards vehicles, if that's how you designate it, but sure, certainly.
So basically what you're saying, it's sort of like an incentive program.
Sure.
That if you meet your budget and then you go to $700,000, then we can take that money and with the offset of being able to purchase automobiles for the law enforcement.
Sure, because if I'm not mistaken, last year's budget, the one that we're operating on right now, he had it projected, the sheriff had it projected that they were going to get 780,000 revenue out of the jail, projected.
It was
56.
It was less than that, yeah, 756, and we reduced it
Oh, yeah,
into the $400,000 range.
okay.
What was the number?
We didn't reduce it. The way you said that, it sounded like
Okay.
we reduced
Okay,
it.
well, we did a budget amendment and reduced it.
Based on information from the sheriff's department, they were nowhere near
Right,
meeting
they were
their
not collecting that amount of revenue, right.
$756,000
So
goal.
we reduced the
Yeah.
expenditures and the revenue to meet those expenditures,
The revised budget for fiscal year 14 says 376,000.
376.
Okay.
And if I explained it and not to interrupt, Andrew, explain it in simple terms so everybody listening and watching can understand it. Basically, they didn't take in as many inmates from other counties as we and they had hoped they would. So therefore, we had to reduce,
All right.
I know we have inmate, a contract for I think it's 40 inmates, maybe 38?
35.
35 from Caldwell County?
Yes, sir.
And that's it?
Yes, sir. We could get some from Wilkes.
Right. And so, Ms. Ferguson, to your point, that's kind of, where we were. why it
Sure,
was reduced.
and that sounds good.
One question. I've been asked this several times. Are the county commissioners required to sign a contract with another county or the state or federal government or whoever to allow inmates to be housed in the new jail? Not on a contract basis, but on just a nightly, per-day basis.
No, you approved a contract with Caldwell, if that's what you're
Right.
asking.
That,
Yes.
the contract with Caldwell is just, they're renting X number of beds.
35
And
beds
those
per
beds are
day.
always going to be available to them.
Will be available for 1 year. That year expires in November.
Well,
At
1
which
year.
time will hopefully be extended.
But
That-
the inmates from Wilkes County, we didn't have to approve a contract for that.
That's correct. That's
If-
correct.
If there's inmates from Iredell County that they need to house there, we don't have to approve a contract for that.
That's correct. That's the way it's always been.
Okay. It's just charged on a per-day basis. Caldwell County gets a break because they did sign a contract to lease that certain number of beds.
Yes, and we charge them for 35, whether they have 30, 32, whatever the number is.
Right,
Or one.
Right.
or one.
So they're charged for 35 no matter what each day.
But Mr. French, based on contracts and the way contracts are set up, and you correct me if I'm wrong, please, if there's a contract entered into by any division of Alexander County government, that contract has to be approved by the county manager, and also you ask the county attorney to look over those before any contracts are signed, and that's the way I understand the way our county government works.
That-
Or your designee.
Right, yeah. We try to do, I mean, there's some things that are pretty straightforward that we don't have to have an attorney, but Ms. Herman and I are not attorneys, so we'll have our county attorney review a lot of things, and recommend to us what we need to do as far as making any changes before it's signed. And then if it's something that involves finances, we report it to you guys.
Larry, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, excuse me. Mr. French, let me ask a question, kind of follows that thought, and Andrew, it's kind of going to where you were going with the incentive program to get more inmates into the jail to make it self-supporting and get patrol cars and so forth. Just to clarify, and I think I understand or know what the answer is, but I want to make sure I understand the answer and also that the people understand what the answer is. Does the county have to be involved in the negotiation of a contract for out-of-county inmates? And let me add a parenthetical comment. As I understand it, the sheriff has two constitutional duties. One is running a jail or detention center, whatever you want to call it, and serving warrants. That's in the North Carolina Constitution. So under the powers of running a detention center, he doesn't have to go through the county commission to get a contract negotiated to house inmates from XYZ county, does he?
That's right. When we first started with the new facility, we talked to several counties because we wanted paying customers, if you will, in the facility. Caldwell was interested. We had some other counties that there was some interest in. And as we had contracts before, we had a contract with Ash. I think we had a contract with Allegheny County to house our inmates. And those contracts were drawn up by, they either sent in a contract to us and our attorney reviewed it, and after review, we signed it. But the sheriff can take inmates from other counties without any agreement. I mean, just working with the other departments.
Working with the other sheriff in
Yes,
another,
sir.
another county?
That's correct.
I just want to clarify that.
Right.
It's up to his discretion because he has the constitutional powers over the detention
Right.
center.
And it takes all of us working to make it work.
Sure. And that's the way it should be, synergistic relationship.
Yes, sir.
Now, let me go back to Commissioner Ferguson's question. And Andrew, Mr. Ferguson, you may want to go ahead and ask a question again or finish your thought. But if I can just maybe amplify what you're talking about. there would be a way, if we could develop a understanding with the sheriff's department, if they did increase the number of out-of-county inmates, that we could agree to a step-by-step process, more inmates, patrol cars, more inmates, more patrol cars. Is that something we could work on going
Certainly.
forward?
I mean, it's really whatever, if it's $100,000, as we get closer to the budgeted number, we certainly can talk more about it. If we exceed that number by whatever amount it is, if it's 30,000, 100,000, then certainly come back to you and talk to the sheriff, and then if that's what you pass in your budget, then he can buy the cars accordingly to that.
But it would be a mutual agreement, an understanding.
Certainly, can't do it, you'd have to do a budget amendment to do it, there just have to be budgetary things done to make it happen.
Yeah, and I understand.
It just
I
doesn't
think-
just happen just because, you say, okay, if you exceed that number, you start buying cars. It doesn't, like anything in the budget, everything's a step-by-step process.
So we'd annotate that into the budget somehow as a footnote or something?
Yes, and we will, of course, as in every month, we get reports and monitor the amount of revenue and expenses in our budget. And so, and you see copies of a budget report each month. So it's not something that's gonna happen in July or August. It's gonna be later on in the fiscal year, so, if it happens, so.
Well, I'd like to commend Commissioner Ferguson for that idea, because I think that's a good idea, and if we can all work together on that, that'd be a way to generate revenue for the jail to help subsidize purchase of patrol cars.
Yes, sir.
Now,
What happens if they don't even get what they're budgeted?
Commissioner Moose, what we probably would do is what we did this year. We would look at their expenses and try to reduce it to adjust that money downward.
As in what? How could you possibly reduce it downward?
That's what we did this year. They had 750,000, whatever that number was in their budget.
And they didn't get
And
it?
it's clear they weren't gonna meet it, so we adjusted expenses, contracted services and different items in the detention budget. We reduced those so that would offset the amount of revenue loss that we would have.
What did you do, though, to reduce it?
We reduced
Number of employees?
No, we reduced the expenses that they have in there. They have other things in there like contracted services, medical, food,
Medical.
things like that, provisions and things like that.
That
So,
was a big bunch of money.
yes, sir, yes, ma'am, it certainly was.
Yeah.
And is.
It's okay, I'm a woman.
now, Mr. French, I hate to be the devil's advocate and the pessimist about, that's sort of the position I'm in sometimes. You said, hopefully, they will get a contract renewal in November with Caldwell.
Well, that's got to be done, so yes, sir.
Okay. And then there's.
There's also, I'm sorry.
We're having a sidebar, and Commissioner, or Chairman and I were having a sidebar about a potential state change that might be
The
coming up.
misdemeanors, what's being proposed is that the counties would have to house misdemeanors, and I think DWIs have over so much
Yes.
time. So you've got that going, but you'd receive some money for that, so, you've got those two things.
But since that's in Raleigh, and we're not really sure how that's gonna pan out, we
Right.
probably have a state employee.
We're counting on the Caldwell thing to happen.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, and go ahead, Mr. Mayberry.
Well, one thing that I did have a question about, there's always the potential for lawsuits. There's one out there now. You'd sent some information about a lady falling in one of the parking lots. Is there any contingency funds in our budget for a claim that the insurance company may deny? What's our
No.
recourse if
Fund balance,
fund balance?
yes, sir.
So
Not to be
but I'm saying if the insurance company denies a claim, then we have to pay it out of fund balance. What's our recourse? Can we sue the insurance company? Is we pretty much, that's it? You're,
In the past,
Out of luck.
of the items that we've dealt with in the past, we've taken the money out of fund balance, and we haven't,
Okay.
I'm sure there's been cases where we've actually gotten into legal discussions with our insurance company, but it ends up, the funds end up coming out of fund balance.
Right.
You mentioned it briefly, and I don't think that we've really had much of a discussion about it, and I'm not
Okay.
sure if this is the venue for it or if it's
Okay.
going to be Monday, but the $50,000 that we're going to put in contingency for the pilot program for the EMS, are you at liberty to explain that now?
I was just going to wait since we haven't talked to all the parties involved in it.
Okay, so we're going to wait. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
And I'll mention that we do have some, and not everybody's seen this yet, so, you know, we've not really talked about in great detail, but we have a little bit of, a few changes proposed for developing a long-term development plan, that sort of thing, so.
You know, at our last meeting, we talked about Western Piedmont Council of Government had made several proposals to us to.
Overlay districts.
Overlay districts, code enforcement, minimum housing, and some other things. And in the planning budgets, there's actually two agreements, recommended for two of those COG agreements. One is for the code enforcement, and the other is for the overlay districts.
Okay.
That's in the planning budget.
Has there been any reduction in general anywhere? I know there's not a COLA increase, but has there been any reduction in salary anywhere in the budget at all?
Any reduction in salaries? I'm not aware of any.
Oh, I don't see any, so. But then that's not, I don't think that's necessarily a strategy. I was just making sure that.
I think the only thing that I've heard is that I've heard some people talk about how we should have furlough days for employees, and I've heard that out in the community, and I had about 26 calls from county employees starting Friday until I got another one at 1 o'clock today, talking about furlough days and how that would affect the budget. Mr. French, would you like to address those furlough days and how it would address the budget, and how, if it is cost effective, and does it also affect all employees, or would it just be a group of employees? Would you please discuss that, sir?
Certainly. In the past, a few years ago, we did furlough days. I think we had 5 furlough days, and the savings that we anticipate would be about $143,000 for those 5 days. And while that's a way to save money, it's not done across the board. It does not impact any of the people any emergency service people. And if you consider that in this year's budget, for example, with DSS and the situation they are, we had programs that go on. If you'll go in their parking lot on Saturday and Sunday, a number of them are working on all Saturdays and Sundays. I think it would be pretty difficult to do furlough days. Also, I mean, honestly, I think it's a bad idea to consider it. It cannot be done fairly across the board. And it doesn't impact all employees the same way.
No, it does not.
So to me,
Well, excuse me, as you're saying, it doesn't affect all departments. the
it
same
doesn't
way.
affect all departments. If you look around us, other counties and other counties with their employees, some of the counties around us are considering COLAs and considering other things. And if we start talking about furlough days, that's not something I think we need to get into. I think what we do is, we're doing that. We're looking at our budget. We're capping our number of our full-time and part-time people, and we're addressing it that way. But I think having furlough days is a bad idea.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Somebody getting ready to say something?
No, I was just going to offer a personal opinion. I think it's a bad idea to do it too. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but I don't think it's a fair way to
No.
handle what we're doing. So I'm not the only commissioner sitting up here. I'm only one of 5, but I don't support that.
Mr. French,
Yes, sir.
we have 275 full-time employees, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And out of that 275, 198 of those full-time employees are in 4 different departments.
Yes, sir.
EMS, law enforcement, public
DS,
health,
and
social
DS,
services.
right.
We've got, and I want to read this off just so the public can know the numbers. EMS has 29 full-time and 28 part-time with no benefits. Law enforcement has, in 911 communications, they have 9 full-time, 8 part-time. In detention, 32 full-time, 16 part-time. Sheriff's Office is 32 full-time and 31 part-time. Public Health has 27 full-time, 6 part-time with benefits, 19 part-time with no benefits. Social Services has 69 full-time and 6 part-time. With those 4 departments taking the majority of the salary resources that we have, I'm looking at all these other departments, and we've got 1 and 2 people here and there. Are there ways to consolidate some of those different departments? I mean, I'm looking at, administration, we've got 3 full-time. Animal Services, we got 4 full-time. Board of Elections, 2 full-time. Building Inspectors, 3 full-time. I don't see any way to consolidate any of those different departments. Do you see a way of doing that?
I mean, I think there's some things you could share, some things, but all in all, no, sir, I don't, I mean, our departments, and we
Still gonna have to have about basically the same number of people.
Certainly, and if you look at other counties, what they have in departments, we are normally well under the other counties our size with the number of employees by department.
And one thing you mentioned earlier, I mean, I think connecting back to what Commissioner Bayberry is talking about, if you look at, maybe get closer to the microphone, but if you look at the DSS department and then physically look at it, like you say, they're there nights, weekends, and all that kind of stuff by implementing NC Fast and just the caseload and so forth, I don't perceive any way you can reduce personnel in that department. They're overloaded with case load and implementing NC Fast, which is the new electronic record keeping, if you will, of the benefits and so forth.
Yes,
Would
sir.
you agree with that?
Yes, sir. And I think what Commissioner Mayberry's saying is, if you look at all the small departments, 1 and 2 and 4 member departments, it's, to try to consolidate things. There's always ways that we ought to look at and try to make things work better and more efficiently. We're always trying to do that. But at the end of the day, you have 1-person department, 2-person departments. It's tough to do that. Our recreation department has 3 people. At one time, they had 6. So,
We've whittled it down and whittled it down and whittled it down over the years.
And, I think that, to me, one of the real keys here is really having a better handle on the part-time people,
Which is what you're
what you're trying to do.
trying to do.
Yes, sir.
By capping,
Yes, sir.
and be ever watchful and ever vigilant on whether you fill that position or don't fill that position if somebody leaves.
Well, that's certainly a strategy, and I commend you for it. One, I don't want to see anybody lose their job.
Right.
At the same time, I'm kind of concerned that how many years are the county employees going to go without a COLA increase or without a raise? If the money's not there, really, legitimately, if the money's not there, we can't give it to the department. It's not like we're holding back money and sitting on a pile of money somewhere and saying, well, this should have been done for a COLA increase, but we're going to hold back.
Right.
Well, and, I understand the cost of living adjustments, but, when you're, we just got some, not disturbing, but it's not positive economic news today. And if you look over the last several years, we've had a run-up in the stock market, the real estate's doing better. We've had, but along with that, we've had a lot of inflation. in certain areas. So your average person has not gotten a cost of living adjustment. Their available resources, available funds have actually gone down over the last, 6, 7 years.
Indeed, indeed.
Disposable income.
Disposable income, thank you. I could not think of the word.
The economy grew last quarter. It was just announced today.
Yes, we had a
Grew
contraction,
less.
right.
And they said it was because of inflation.
If we have two more quarters of contraction, then we'll go into that recession I've been kind of harping on.
Yes, sir.
I know the price of gas is going up. It'll cause it to go next quarter.
One thing I want to mention, and Chairman Yoder kind of mentioned to it, I know we get a lot of information from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners about, and they're lobbying on our behalf, county's behalf, not just all counties, 100 counties in the state. There are a lot of things that are brewing in the state legislature because they're struggling like we're struggling to balance, and the state legally has to balance their budget. They can't go into deficit spending. Now, some of the things that are brewing out there that we have no control over is, for example, lottery funds, how they're sent to the counties to support the schools, for example, capital expenditures and construction and so forth. So there's legislation pending to change that. As we were mentioning before, there's legislation pending on how many more misdemeanors we would be housing in the jails. So there's a lot of things, and I'm not painting a picture of doom and gloom, and there's further clouds on the horizon that's been discussed, and the chairman of the commission knows about this, and you do too, that we don't know if it's going to pass. We don't know. We never know until it's passed in the legislature whether it's going to be sent to the counties. Alexander County and the other counties maintaining secondary roads. And that's a big deal for small counties like Alexander County and counties like ours because we have a lot of secondary roads. I'm not saying it's going to happen. We just don't know whether or not it is going to happen. So a lot of these things that we're talking about, we don't know when a shoe could drop, or maybe it doesn't drop. But the stark thing that always stands out in my mind, since I've been a county commissioner, we, the county, have to provide space for probation and parole in the county. And we provide the space and the heating and air conditioning. And you'd have to correct me if I'm wrong, we don't supply the telephone system, do we?
No, sir.
But it's the heating and air
I
conditioning.
mean, we supply it, but,
Yeah, and we get reimbursed a grand total of $1 for that, do we not?
yes, sir.
And that's a mandate from the state.
That's correct.
And what does that cost? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yes, sir, I do not.
But it's more than $1.
Yes, sir, yes, sir, I would think that's safe to say.
Yes. So I'm just saying, sometimes there's a lot of things out of our control that the state will mandate to us, and we have no control. Just like the last session of this body, we had to pass because of a law that was passed in the state legislature to do a budget amendment for $130,000 for new ballot machines for the next upcoming general election.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And that was, one of those nice surprises that comes out of the blue.
Right.
So we're trying our darndest, and you are, and your staff is, and we are, to manage the dollars we have. But sometimes we don't control what comes to us.
And Commissioner Jennings, that's why you want to have a healthy fund balance. That's
So-
another reason to have a healthy fund balance. When things happen and you don't have control, or it's out of your control, you want to have some funds you can pull from.
Some wiggle room, money in the bank.
Another reason.
Money in the bank.
Yes, sir.
It was only 2 years ago, we had a 29% fund balance.
That's
And now we
correct.
got an 8. Wonder what happened to it.
We
mean,
kept spending
kept
money.
spending.
Yes, ma'am. And we knew what we spent the money on, and we didn't raise taxes.
Right.
So,
Well, it's not that the people are paying too
Well-
little taxes, it's that the government's spending too much money, the government being us.
I would have to say, you're saying all spending, but a lot of this has to do with, we have a new jail detention center that just came online that we have to pay for, and we've got a lot of operational costs, a huge increase on operational costs for that detention center.
When we proposed to build the jail, of course, that's something that we talked about then, and we talked about addressing it a little bit at a time, and we chose not to. We chose to use fund balance to pay for it. And so what's happened is, as the expenses at the jail have grown, and it's not just the jail, but that's where the biggest part of it is.
Okay, let me ask you a question. What, at the old jail, what was the operational costs?
I think the last was about 1.1 million, but
1.1,
that
1.2.
includes several hundred thousand of actually transferring our prisoners to other counties. But I think the last budget we had full year was 1.1 million.
Okay.
The budget now is like 2.6 or 2.7, plus you have about right at $1 million debt service.
Okay, so we've got $1 million debt service, so there's 1 million, so that's 4 cents. 4 cents of our current property tax, okay? What's the operational cost over top of the old jail?
I'd say at least conservatively $1.8 million to $2 million, because all the costs in the jail are not in that budget. You have utility costs that are in public buildings.
So
for
there's,
example.
so.
Say $2 million.
$2 million, so that's
That's
8 cents of our
Yes, sir.
property tax.
That's correct.
So we've had an increase of 12 cents of our property tax, 12 cents of that current property tax that we haven't raised, 12 cents of that, and that is, I back up, we did use part of that increase that we had to pay for that, the last property tax increase. So anyway, we've got at least the 8 cents of our current budget is going to operational costs,
Certainly.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we haven't raised property taxes 8 cents. But we're having to reduce our expenses everywhere else to pay for the operational costs at the new jail. And that's understandable, that's what's gonna happen.
Yes, sir.
But we can't act like it was a big surprise, and the public shouldn't act like it was a big surprise either.
That's correct. This is not something we just started talking about.
No.
This has been talked about and talked about and talked about for 7 or 8 years, actually. I think one of the first actions most of you took was voting on the financing of the new jail.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it's something we're all well aware of.
Well, to be fair, I've only been on the
Except for
board
you,
for
I'm
about
sorry,
5
Commissioner
months. So, apparently, I picked a very interesting time to get into politics.
Well,
Well,
sorry
it's
about
not
that.
just it's not the jail's fault. Now, come on, we spent probably $3.5 to $4 million on other things other than the jail. Didn't we? Didn't we buy
If
almost $2 million worth of property?
We did. We spent $1.8 million on property, but you still have not done a budget amendment for the $500,000 for CVCC.
$1.8 million on property for what? Is this?
On the property that,
It's,
Property.
I know, I'm just
on the
trying to get
Taylor
him to
Togs property, on the
elaborate.
Taylor Togs property.
That's the last
There's
payment.
2 buildings and 25 acres.
Yes. And there's one payment remaining, which is about $580,000.
Right.
But
That, you're correct. Yep.
I was just going to say, I mean, I'm hopeful that the public is aware, the citizens of the county are aware, that that's not just spending that money and burning the money. The purpose of adding that facility is to train employees to work in the industry that exists in the county today. And I'll use one example. Hank Bird, who was the president of Snyder Mills, told me person to person that he has to hire 50% of his employees out of Wilkes County because he can't find the trained employees to run the computerized machinery, welding machinery and so forth, in his plant, Snyder Mills. He said and one of the purposes of this expansion of CVCC is to add a computerized welding program, is it not?
Yeah, that's correct.
So therefore, employees prospective employees, people from Alexander County, could be trained there, and there's a ready source of jobs for those trained people, as opposed to Hank Byrd having to hire people from Wilkes County. He could hire people from Alexander County. So we're not just throwing that money to the wind, hoping that it's going to be for a good purpose. One of the largest employers in the county has already told us and me that that's what he intends to do. He is, as soon as he can get trained employees from Alexander County, because people go other places out of his plant to work, they retire, and he needs to replace them. So if he's got people from Alexander County, from his community mindedness, he wants to hire people from Alexander County.
Mr. Gies, I think, and I'm going to segue with your thought here. I think one of the problems with explaining the CVCC project is that there was a certain expectancy that it was going to move quicker. And since we're dealing with the state and we're dealing with grants and we're dealing with all this money, a lot of these activities are going to be a little bit delayed in their gratification. I don't think that we're going to see, after we pass this budget, the doors open up there and the program started right away. I think we might need to lower our expectations a little bit about how quickly this comes online.
Oh,
But as
I
far
think-
as- Yeah, but as far as what you're saying, that's money well spent.
Sure. And I agree with you totally. It's, and Mr. French, you know this, and I think all the commissioners know this. It's not going to happen overnight. We're having to take, because of the economy, because of the dearth of grants available out there, we have to move at a slower pace than we would like to move to get the facility up and running. But you have to be, again, physically responsible. I mean, you know, we could take what we have left in the fund balance, which we wouldn't do, but if we wanted to get it done faster, we could do it. But again, back to what we've discussed earlier, the local government commission that governs whether or not we can borrow money depending on our fund balance. Where our fund balance is now, if we needed money to borrow for the expansion of CVCC, we couldn't borrow it, could we?
That's correct.
That might be a good thing. I mean, somebody's got to stop us.
I've already said what Mr. Byrd said, so I'm not gonna.
Well, we're going to get past this budget, and then we're going to start working on this immediately on next year's budget. That's the obvious. And maybe we'll have some different conversations about how we should possibly do things with that one-year projection. Because it seems like, based upon watching from the back row last year, that there's a lot more concern, a lot more attention being paid to this budget than last year's budget. Maybe it's just time that we do things a little different, a little more efficient. I'm sure you're open to some suggestions, but.
Certainly.
If I may address kind of what you're saying, Mr. Ferguson, and I only know this because of conversations I've had with Mr. French, and is that he has said, and Mr. French, I'd like you to comment on this too, this year, most in particular because of where we are on our fund balance, you started working with the departments earlier in explaining when they needed to supply you the information on their budget requests so that we, the commissioners, could be aware. And I think, Andrea, Mr. Ferguson, it dovetails exactly what you're talking about. Because of sales tax revenues are flat, we don't know what's going to happen to property tax because of reval. We're going to have to be more watchful and more faithful and more vigilant on expenditures. And so you started earlier this year, did you not, than most years?
As we were winding up last year, we started talking about the upcoming fiscal year and the situation we were going to be under. And as everybody recalls, with the budget vote, it was 3-2, and two of the commissioners talked about a tax increase, and there was a lot of talk at the end of the process about a tax increase. And you're absolutely right, Commissioner Jennings, but we consider the budget process as a 12-month process. It doesn't just, but we started with departments earlier. We were trying to get a budget earlier to you guys, and we did. earlier in May. Normally, we give you a budget towards the end of May, and then we get, we go later in the month of June. But this year, we've started much earlier with departments, and we will continue to do that. So we'll have more time to talk about it.
And excuse me for interrupting, I didn't want to leave the chairman out, Chairman Yoder, because he's been intimately involved in these same discussions. And Mr. Ferguson, I think, and Rick, Mr. Finch, you tell me if I'm incorrect in translating what you just said, and Andrew, what you were talking about. This passing a budget, if we pass it next Monday, is not the end of the budget process.
It's just the beginning.
It's a synergistic thing throughout the whole entire fiscal year. Whether you do budget amendments, whether you don't do budget amendments, is that a fair assessment?
Yes, sir. Our budget, even though our budget year ends June the 30th, you know, our expenses don't stop. We still have utilities to pay and different things to pay, and it takes several months. Our audit is normally not completed till the end of October, so it takes, you know, you got all that winding down and starting up of a new budget. So, but every month, we look at, I've got, you know, we, like you said earlier, Commissioner Jennings, we talk about where we stand with sales taxes, and we talk quite often about where we stand with property taxes and compare it to the last 3 or 4 years, and different other areas where we want to pay special attention. And if something looks out of whack, so to speak, looks out of reason, then we start talking about it and talking to the departments about it. So I think we do a good job of watching our budget each month. But we started earlier this year, as you were talking about earlier, yes.
And I'm not alluding to the fact that, or intimating that I think we're
Right.
not being diligent in our efforts to monitor things, but I'm just want to make sure everybody is aware, the proposed budget that we have in front of us is not necessarily the end of the discussions and the moving parts and all that.
Sure.
It goes on all year. If
It does.
anybody that watches this on Charter Cable or listens to it on the radio or listens to it or watches it on YouTube, it goes on all year long.
Some of you have your packets for Monday night. If you look in those packets, there's 3 or 4 budget amendments. There's always a budget amendment for something. So that means it's constantly changing. It's like you're saying, it's constantly moving.
Yeah, a budget's just a guideline, you know, just because there's a number in the budget, you know, that you're gonna spend $600 on paper supplies for a certain department, that doesn't mean that department's gonna spend that $600 on buying paper. So budget is a guideline, and you just have to make sure that you're diligent at trying to stay within budget, and you hopefully come in under budget. Just a couple things that I wanted to mention, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail about this because we still haven't. We know that this is going to be a compromise. If it passes, whatever passes, something will pass. Something will pass. It might not be exactly this, but whatever it is going to be a compromise. There's some things in here I'm not too, thrilled about, but, we'll try to work through them. And that's, budget's a guideline. Just because it passes on July the 1st doesn't mean we can't work through the rest of the fiscal year to try to make it better. A couple of the things that I had mentioned, and we had I guess about a 2.5-hour-long meeting, 2-hour-long meeting with Mr. French today, or I did, going through some of these items. One of the things that I, have concern about is the tag office, of course. That, I know it is a service to the residents of this county, but it's losing $80,000 a year. We have to figure out a way in the next year. I'd like to see that come in at a break even by next year. I know we just got it open, but we've got to fix that somehow.
Mr. Mayberry, if you expect the tag office to break even, no, don't take this the wrong way. You might as well shut it down now because it
Really?
won't break even. There's no way it'll break even.
Well, is that something that we need to look at? Is it, or the citizens of this county, is it worth losing $80,000 to provide that service to the citizens of this county. I know all these departments are not going to break even. Is that something that's worth it? I don't know. Or is it better to have to drive to Catawba County to take care of your tag issues?
Well,
And I know Commissioner Yoder and myself have had several conversations about this, and we lack the large dealerships. That's where they're getting a lot of their income in these other counties to the reason that they're able to operate. I'm sorry.
Well, the reason that it loses money, is it not, is it's because it's operated by the county. And Catawba County and Iredell County, they're privately operated.
It's the same revenue coming into each agency, whether it's private or whether it's
I
public.
know, but the people, when Bob Phillips run it, I'm sure he didn't run it at an $80,000 a year.
I can assure you that when Mr. Phillips was running the thing, that he had Larry Schrontz Ford, and he had some other dealerships that are still open here in the county, and they did just about all their transactions through that dealership. And
Well,
at that time, it was
they're not losing money
booming.
in other in surrounding
I
counties.
agree with you 100%, but in these other counties, they have the dealerships that they get theirs from, and it's a tremendous money maker for them because they get so much off of each transaction. And the other thing that's helping us is, you talk about the license plate agency losing $80,000, but I haven't seen the studies yet because it just went into effect last July 1, is that not correct? On the property taxes on automobiles now are collected through the license plate agency. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the agency gets $2.50 per transaction that's paid to that facility. Is that not correct for collecting the taxes? There's a percentage that goes to the license plate agency that,
Well, it comes off of the property tax revenue.
Right.
Since we're the same agency, it's going out of one pocket and into.
right, it's coming all into the county. Whereas in other counties, they are showing a profit because it's probably on, because they're getting that percentage into their pocket that's coming from taxpayers and they're paying it. And that's the way I understand it. So therefore, we would be losing money where they'd be showing more of a profit also with that revenue they're receiving. Now, based on the way it's explained to me when I was in Raleigh, I'm not,
Right.
so there again, that's another way that we're not getting that revenue because
Right.
it's just,
Right. The only
it's
point I'm trying to
coming
make,
in, but it's staying in the department, if you know what I'm trying to say here. I mean,
Right.
it's like, I own a lawnmower service and all the money comes into that, I take care of it, but the lawnmower service loses money because I'm making money. I mean, because you make it look, it's the way the thing balances out, but the way the numbers go based on the I believe it's a percentage, is it not 1% or 2% or something like that? I don't remember what it is, but there's a transaction fee there that it has to pay per each.
Guy probably would have more information about
Yeah.
that. I don't know
How-
that. We-
Right.
but
One other cost that's not a revenue that you could, I don't know if you could see this or not, but how much money would we lose if we did not have the license plates agency here to help us collect vehicle taxes, vehicle property taxes?
I don't think we would lose it. It would have to reflect wherever the people go to renew their tag.
Okay.
Because no matter where you buy your license plate, you've got to pay for
You've
your
gotta pay
property
the-
taxes at the time of the transaction.
Well, then how is that helping us collect vehicle property taxes?
Well, hopefully, people will be more willing to pay it here locally than to drive somewhere. Now, if they were going to have to make a trip to another county, they might delay renewing the registration, which means they're delaying paying their property taxes, which means a delay in the county getting it. But we would not lose that property tax revenue. Wherever they go to renew that tag, the tax will be collected at that time.
Okay.
And the state sends it out to us electronically. So, I mean, because we might have people now that work in Catawba County and they go renew theirs in Catawba, so we're getting that money. But, yeah, if we have people that are not willing to drive that far and make a special trip, it might delay those collections.
Well, can we have an honest conversation about how agencies are supposed to self-fund themselves anyway? I mean, this is government that's paid for by taxpayer money, so the whole about the only department that I know is Leanne's health department that comes anywhere close to being self-sufficient. So, I mean, we need to have a legitimate
And whenever
conversation.
the health department does theirs, they've got revenue coming in from dental.
Yeah.
They collect Medicaid. They,
Home
you know,
health.
and they collect the insurance and everything off of it. I mean, when you provide EMS service, law enforcement service, jail service, and social services, all these things, none of them are money makers. All the county does is provide services. We're a service-oriented business, whether it's county, state, federal, whoever, and all that revenue comes from tax dollars. I mean, it's like everybody was talking about the state cutting out state income tax. Hey, they cut state income tax out, they lowered it. But trust me, it's gonna cost you more because of the taxes that you're gonna have to pay in user taxes. They're gonna get that money back, they're not gonna lose, and we just don't happen to have
Or worse,
user.
or worst case, they're gonna dump it on the county. So
Right.
They're gonna say, oh,
And-
you know, we're not
and-
providing
and-
these services anymore, now it's gonna be a
But
county
we
service.
don't have user taxes as much as other counties do. I mean, and we just don't have the facilities that we're able to tax, such as motel tax and restaurant tax and alcohol tax and sugar tax. I mean, we don't have all those things that we can receive revenue from. And it doesn't make any difference in what area it is. I'm just saying that we are not able to tax those things like other areas are because they get the special privilege tax, which had to be approved by state government because the only tax we're eligible to invoke is property taxes. Everything else has to be approved by the state, and most time they won't let you do anything unless you have to do it by referendum, which we got the quarter cent sales tax, which we use to help offset the cost of the jail. That's what we had it passed for, and we asked the citizens to vote for that so we could put it on the jail back when we did it. And so, I mean, it's just a non-win situation. I mean, Mr. French, I'm gonna tell you now, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I think you've done a really, really good job with the budget. I think going in and trying to cut the things has been worthwhile. I think that there's been, as far as I'm concerned, fat trimmed out of the budget in areas. I don't think you'll ever be able to trim all the fat because some departments you don't control. And I'm not gonna throw bricks at any department whatsoever. Law enforcement is a dangerous profession, and it can cost you a tremendous amount of money. We built the jail because we felt like it was necessary. I'm not gonna throw a rock there anymore. Operational costs, we knew whenever we started talking about the jail that it was gonna cost us 2 to 3, maybe 4 cents in operational costs when we first started doing it. Therefore, the only thing I want you to know is that I appreciate what the finance department's done. I really want to tell these department heads that they've done a good job and tried to cut costs as much as they can. I don't want to see any employee lose their job. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, if we have to raise taxes 4 or 6 cents or 10 cents, I mean, I'm not going to vote for a 10-cent tax increase. I'm going to tell you right now, right quick, right fast, I will not do it. As far as what we probably need to do in the future, I think we probably need to look at a 4 to 6 cent tax increase. And I think then we need to sit down and we really need to start a plan and look at how we're going to progress in the next 3 to 4 years as far as getting our revenue back up and getting our fund balance. I think it's gonna take at least a 4 to 6 cent this year, a 5 cent next year, and a 5 cent the year after in order for us to get our fund balance back to where it needs to be based on reval, because we'll not know what we have to do there to do the offset with the taxes at that time in order to balance it out, whether the reval's low or whether it's high or whatever. I'd love for it to come in really high. It'd be beautiful for everybody. Then we could probably see maybe a tax decrease. Don't see that happening, but it'd be a good thing. But you guys have done a good job, and I've asked questions tonight because the concerns I've had from a lot of people in the community. And I've had county employees call me. They were really concerned about this furlough thing, and I'm glad you explained that tonight. And I'm one of those people that's against furloughs. It doesn't work as the way it should, as far as equally all the way across the board.
So-
And I want to tell you I appreciate what you've done, and make sure everybody understands that.
Larry, I'd like to remind you that you don't get a tax decrease when you get a higher evaluation, it comes in higher.
Well, I said a tax decrease. You could also ask to drop the property taxes. At that time, if the reval comes in high, you could see a drop in property
Yeah, but it's gonna be the
taxes.
same money.
Well, you just offset it, but it looks like you get a tax increase, because if you pay 5 cents and you cut it a penny, it's only 4 cents you're paying.
Not really. When you come down to the bottom line and you walk in the tax office and you pay the bill, is when you realize whether it's higher or lower.
Right, exactly. And that's what,
There ain't no way you can do it that way.
we no longer have a $32 million budget. It doesn't matter if the rate's higher, the rate's lower, what the reevaluation is, we have to have more than $32 million.
Exactly.
And do you agree, Mr. French?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay. we're not going to be able to do a $32 million budget in this county anymore. Correct?
That's correct. With the building of some of the things that we've done, one of which is adding the law enforcement and detention center and doing some other things that we've done, we've passed 32 million.
Okay.
That ship has sailed.
You know, if you look at inflation over the long term, since the late 80s, early 90s, it's averaged about 3% a year. So if you go back and look at that, and then we've held this budget down. We actually had a big decrease when 2009, cut it down to $30 million, is that correct? But we're no longer at the $32 million budget. And it doesn't matter where the revenues come from, we don't have a $32 million budget anymore. So we have to have more revenues coming in.
Well, we didn't have the jail in 2009 either.
Right.
So I guess I need to ask, with the information, the budget that we've given you tonight, do we have the budget ordinance based on those numbers? Because Monday, the budget ordinance will be in front of you. And so those numbers that you have in front of you, do we need to move forward with those numbers? I mean, the staff need to know sort of what numbers to plug in.
I can't see this late trying to change any of the numbers anymore.
I don't see that you can cut any more out than what you already cut.
I feel the same way.
Okay, and so,
I think the only thing we need to look at is, put a stipulation in there about the part-time employees, make sure that that's in there.
We
Put the
will.
stipulation in there, or the incentive package for the law enforcement personnel about, saving money if they go over and above that, and they have the opportunity to buy more cars, because I know that
We'll include
the
that.
health department did that last year, that we saved enough money that she was able to buy 2 cars. That's what I thought it was 2 cars. So that was budget savings that she was able to do that with. And I think you also need to look at, there was some talk about expanding the Economic Development Board. I think you need to look at putting a stipulation in there that we'll expand the Economic Development Board from 5 to, 12 members or 13 members, And I think, slide that in there. That's my opinion now. This is just
Right.
my opinion. I'm just, the rest of them can speak up.
we just,
But I think we're pretty much set on the numbers.
okay, as far as, do we need to bring you said 4 to 6 cents, so as far as the revenue, is it based on 4, so do we need to bring you, what do we do?
Well, my opinion is, Mr. French, that if there's a tax increase whatsoever, okay, and I don't know what these other folks on this board are gonna do. I know what I'll do, and I'm not gonna speak for them. They vote their conscience. If there's a 4 or 6 cent tax increase, I think we need to stipulate in the budget that, also, that money will go directly to fund balance. It will not be used for expenditures unless an emergency situation comes up,
That's what fund
a
balance is for.
disaster or something of that nature. And any extra expenditures that come up have to be approved by the Board of County Commissioners, that people can come to you and ask you for things and discuss them with you, but that if there's any budget amendments or anything that has to be approved that's over and above and beyond what's in the budget, then has to be approved by the board. That'd be my opinion, sir.
And offset.
I mean,
It'd be nice to have any budget amendment offset, but
right.
you can't make any.
Yeah, because your
We're up-
budget amendments are
we're
gonna
up to
be.
40 budget amendments already, so.
But the numbers we bring you, the board budget ordinance we bring you, that you look at on Monday night, we have to prepare it tomorrow.
Right, I understand that. You're gonna bring
Okay,
that budget.
So if
you're gonna bring that-
we put 4 cents in there and you say 6, or if we say 0 and you say 3, we're not going, I'm just trying to get a little
So
closer.
what you're trying to say is you're wanting some type of,
Well, if you look at the number,
you
look
want
at
us to
if
sort of
you
look
look
at
at
you and
what
say,
you
well,
have,
I
it's
think we'll
got,
do 4 cent or 6 cent. There's no tax increase plugged into this one, is there?
there's 4 cents in
Is there really?
there's 4 cents in that one.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I missed that somehow. I didn't, but I'm just saying. Yeah, but, it's up to this board, if they want to say 4 cent, or want to say 6 cent, or 8 cent, or 10 cent, or no cent. You want direction to go?
Well, we don't know what number to, and
What do y'all think?
and you can tell me Monday.
Is it
You
just-
give him a number so he'll know how to plug it in.
Is it just a matter of inserting a number? Okay.
No,
But we need to tell you what that number is.
That's what we're saying. That's what we're saying.
Mr. Chairman, what would you like to poll the members of the board?
That would be a vote.
It'd be a vote, we're not here to vote tonight. I think, Mr. French, I think we probably could get by with, oh, man, why do I have to be chairman this year?
You wanted it.
No, I didn't, well, it doesn't matter to me, I mean, we all got the same voice.
I would be willing to go 5 or 6 cents. I don't,
Plug 6 in,
Okay?
plug 6 in, let's see what happens.
Okay?
And if it's less than that, then we'll just have to make the adjustments. I mean,
Okay.
now, y'all say what y'all want to do. I mean, y'all
Okay.
say what y'all, I'm just saying, I think plug 6 in, and I think it'll be good.
Okay.
But it goes directly to fund balance, not as an expenditure.
We know. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I asked 2 people on the way to this meeting tonight, and they said hold firm. And that means no tax increase. I think we have to have a tax increase, but I'm not voting for a 6.
Okay. All right.
I'd vote for a 6% tax increase.
Okay.
Well, there's a justification for you to run the numbers with the 6,
Okay.
so sorry about that.
Ms. Mayberry, do you have a comment?
I said 5 or 6.
5 or 6, okay.
Okay. All right.
She can't do one for 5 or 6.
We'll already have a copy of the 4, right? So.
Yes, sir, we'll have to.
You're talking about doing.
Yes, sir. We'll change that. We'll address it.
You mean you have a copy of the budget before, right? That's what you said. He talking about before, Judy.
This is
That's what I
the,
said.
this
He
is,
said beforehand.
excuse me, let me be clear. This revised budget includes a 4-cent
That's
tax
correct.
increase.
Yes, sir.
And 3 of us just said, prepare it for 6.
Yes, sir. Okay. We'll bring it to you Monday.
Now, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Mr. French, or is there anything anybody wants to say about the budget tonight?
I want to thank the department heads for coming and the county employees that came. Nice to see you guys here.
I do have a question. Monday night, are we going to have a public hearing and then?
No.
Okay,
Yes, sir. You've had your public hearing.
okay.
Monday night, it'll be up or down.
That's correct.
So you need to understand that if you vote down, then it's a very difficult situation for the next 90 days. Because until we pass a budget, then they'd have to do it, but we'd have to have a budget
We don't-
meeting the first meeting of every month,
We
so
don't-
that they'd be able to do that, and we don't want to go there.
Miss-
Right, yes, we, you know.
Mr. French, and excuse me, Ms. Yoder, for interrupting, but Jennifer, if you could come back to the podium just 1 minute again. I want to make sure that people understand the significance, if we did pass the tax increase, what it does to the fund balance, what this additional 6 cents does. If we don't have it, what would our fund balance be?
If we don't have it, our fund balance will drop down to well below 8%. With the 6 cents tax increase, it will still fall. It will not grow. It will still fall, but it won't fall by as much. We're trying to keep ourselves at that 8% bare minimum or above so that we will be able to continue to get LGC approval for any projects or grant opportunities that come our way. So it will still fall, but it won't fall by as much.
Okay? I just want to make sure everybody understood that.
One question I do want to ask you, Mr. French, and I'd like to have this information because our school came to us and they didn't come, excuse me, I apologize for that. They did not come to the meeting. But they sent a letter requesting $250,000, which we didn't do anything with. I would like to have the information from the school board, what the tax increase will do for them as far as the low wealth money, and if they can, you know, they may not be,
Anything for them this year.
right, it's next year, but they will have some idea of how it will affect
We'll ask
the low wealth fund. If we could get that information from them, I'm sure that Sharon can give you an estimate. She pretty much probably knows.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think it'd be good information for the citizens to have, especially with all the uproar about teacher pay and schools and all that, and our lottery funding and how it's going to go. I think it'd be good
So-
information for the citizens to have.
So let me get this straight. If we raise property taxes, then the Alexander County school system actually gets more money from the state.
They get more low wealth money.
Can
Low
you
wealth.
come up to the,
They get more low wealth money, but they won't get it this year. It's
right?
next year.
It'll be the end of next year?
Yes,
Okay.
Right.
'Cause
They do
it's-
get more money. Okay.
Because it's tied to our property tax rate.
Right.
So the higher the property tax is, the more money they get.
The average is 62.5, so our property tax rate would be higher than that.
Okay.
Does any other commissioner have anything else they'd like to say, ask? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. Those opposed likewise. We are adjourned.